Psst. Hey, come here. If you were on this side of the street in GTA 3 and needed to get to that side of the street legally to get to the L train, how would you do it? I'll give you 3 seconds. Time's up. Thank you for unpausing. Trick question. You can't. You cannot cross this street in Liberty City legally. If there is no indication given to the pedestrian by pavement lines or signs that they can cross, then they cannot legally cross this street. This is known as infrastructure-induced noncompliance, or more simply, pedestrian entrapment. Essentially, the city is forcing you to break the law to get to the L train. And this is the only L train entrance in this district. So that's a problem. And that got me thinking. Does Liberty City's urban planning make any sense? What we're going to do today is walk around Portland, the easternmost island of Liberty City, and find out which of its 7 districts are most livable. How do we know if a district is livable? Great question. You were always my favorite student. We will be using 8 metrics that I have actually pulled from real neighborhood assessments. There's walkability. It's pretty straightforward. It's how easy... It's apparently not that straightforward. It's how easily and safely can a pedestrian get around the city. Second is transit access. That is how close is any given resident to an entrance to a subway or L train. And also, can you reach these legally? Next is land use mix, which is basically how efficiently is the land being used. Fourth is street connectivity, another pretty straightforward one. How easily can drivers and first responders navigate to get where they need to go? Fifth, park access. How close are you to a park? And not just that, but is there anything to do in the park? Are there benches, pathways, basketball courts? Then there's housing diversity. What are the housing options? And not just the amount of options, but the diversity of options for all income levels. 7 is employment access. Are there jobs nearby, and can you live where you work? And also, are these jobs diverse? And the final category is safety and design. This is probably the one that will piss off real urban planners and city planners more than anything else. I mean, I'm sure most of this video will probably upset them anyway. In this category, I'm essentially combining the idea of public safety and also the design to enforce safety in the city. For example, are crosswalks properly labeled? Are there guardrails to keep pedestrians from falling over edges? And also, does the infrastructure itself enforce safety and not promote violence and or illegal activities? Okay, we've got 7 districts, we've got 8 categories in each district. This is going to be a long one, so make sure to grab a snack, lean that chair back, and let's start at my uncle's favorite spot, the red light district. For walkability, one of the first things I noticed was the size of the sidewalks. There's plenty of space for multiple pedestrians to walk down them side by side, cross each other, completely safe. So that's a good start. But something I noticed pretty quickly was that I was somewhat stuck in the outskirts of the district until I went all the way around the block. And for game design, that's not a terrible idea. It implores the player to explore more, figure out more of the map. But we're not playing a game here. We're city planning. Come correct. So imagine you're living at this apartment right here and your uncle asks to meet at his favorite spot, the Sex Club, which is technically just on the other side of the complex you live on. You tell him you'll meet him there in a minute and you start to make your walk. Problem is, all of the alleyways dead end. You cannot get through this building complex, which forces you to go all the way around. It's extremely cumbersome, it's very annoying, and it sucks. This is what's called poor permeability, and don't worry, I'm not going to go this detailed into every category for every single district. I'm just setting up what we'll be looking for in the future. Now, the inside of the district, on the other hand, has some great permeability. There are open alleyways where you can clearly see the other side too, which makes for a safe entrance and exit. There is an issue with a lack of lighting here, but we won't worry about that in walkability right now. Now, I do have a problem with this small staircase that cuts through the little park in the RLD. That's the red light district, please keep up. And that's that there's no adjacent accessibility ramp or lift. Part of city planning is making sure that everyone can get around the city safely, and that means everyone. Making your friend in a wheelchair go around the long way to meet you at Ammunition so you can go shoot at the strip club, it just feels wrong, doesn't it? Anyway, we're gonna give the red light district a solid 3 out of 5 for walkability. Next up is transit access. While there is technically no transit entrances within the borders of RLD itself, they are right on the edges. So it doesn't feel necessarily fair to say that they don't have access. The main issue is the one that I raised at the beginning of the video, is that one of the access points doesn't have any legal crossing for the pedestrian to know whether or not they can go across this street. And the most damning part is that if you were to be walking the opposite direction coming from the L train, there actually is a walk, don't walk signal on this side of the road, which means they did intend for people to cross here, but just didn't have the means or didn't care enough to finish the job. 3 out of 5, we're moving on. Land use mix. There's a good variety of businesses in that small park we talked about earlier, and on top of that, quite literally, on top of most of these businesses are apartments and hotels. This is called vertical city planning, something that Jane Jacobs, one of the most notable figures in urban planning, was a huge proponent of. She believed in something called eyes on the street, which was essentially the idea that the people living there could be a natural surveillance to keep the street safe if they had view of it. The more eyes on the streets, the safer the environment, the more comfortable everybody is. Now, this is the red light district, so I have to assume a lot of these rooms are owned by the sex shops and peep shows down below, but I'm sure many of the employees actually live up in these rooms, and they're occupied often, so we're going to count them as living spaces. Probably being generous, but I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 for land use mix. Next up, we have street connectivity, and this is the first one that kind of upset me. This is silly, but as I was driving down this road, I realized that there are 2 different walkways to get to the shops on the left here, but there is not a connecting driveway. Now, this tunnel here could act as a way for cars to get through a little quicker instead of having to go around, but there's no clear signs indicating that, so it's illegal for me to try. Not only that, but this is very bad for delivery drivers and emergency responders. Now they have to take this long-winded road just to get there, wasting precious moments, possibly murdering somebody in the process. Okay, that's not technically murder. Murder by proxy. Now, having better walkability than driving is not necessarily a bad thing, especially for something in the red light district that we can assume has more foot traffic than it has car traffic, but it is unsafe. To be honest, the rest of the district is not that bad. All the streets connect pretty well, so we're going to give this a 3 out of 5. The red light district dips its toe into having park access, but never fully commits and dives in. Really all there is that small strip of park that we talked about earlier, but again, there is nothing there to interact with. There's just this little walkway to get you to the shops. And to be honest, most of the park actually takes place in Hepburn Heights, so we can't count that for the red light district. And don't even get me started on the waterfront. I am not considering that a park. It is completely wasted. There are no vendors. There is no live music. Sounded very upset when I said that. And therefore, we are giving the RLD park access a 2 out of 5. Now let's talk housing. So while I did say that there was a good land use mix earlier because we have a lot of hotels and apartments above these businesses here, what we're looking for in housing is also a diversity of homes. We need a range of incomes. Your options here are basically live above a strip club, live above a nail salon, live above a gun store, live above a bar. Okay, the last one actually sounds pretty sick. How I Met Your Mother style. There is 0 housing diversity here. It is just all small apartments in a working class district. And I'm not saying that's inherently bad. Working class housing is absolutely necessary, but there's just no range here. No starter homes, no family units, just studio apartments where downstairs is a 24-hour rager going on. Also, could you imagine the noise coming from the Sex Club every night? Whew, couldn't get any sleep. I can't get any sleep because I'm the one making the noise. Whoa! Now, employment access is where I think the RLD does really well. The ammunition, the shopping center, which had multiple storefronts, including clothing boutiques, nail salons, dry cleaners, the bar, and there also appears to be a factory on the corner, which at first glance might look like it's closed for business, but a keen eye might notice that there's steam coming from these vents, which means that there's stuff running in there, which means somebody's paying for it. And if somebody's paying for it, people are working there. Plenty of adult entertainment and sex work, which is work, by the way. We here at the Liberty City urban planning sector do not discriminate against that. Now, if you're looking for white-collar office work, you are out of luck. But that's fine, not every district needs to be a business center. This is a working-class employee hub, and it does that job well. We're going to give employment access a 4 out of 5. And finally, for the RLD, we'll be looking at safety and design. And this is where we sadly start to fall apart again. Let's start with some positives. There are streetlights that keep it lit during night. Most of the intersections have traffic signals. Basic infrastructure does exist. But then there's problems within the alleyways. There is little to no lighting within these alleyways, and there's a few areas where they come to dead ends or you lose visibility from the street. This violates most of the principles of CPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. CPTED says that spaces need natural surveillance, lighting, clear sight lines, and escape routes. These alleys have some of those, but not enough. These are textbook entrapment zones. You do not want to be here at night. And again, to ground this, I understand this is Grand Theft Auto. It's a video game about crime, but we're not here to talk about that. And there's also an issue with the crosswalks, like previously mentioned, or lack thereof. Oh, wait, did I just jaywalk? Technically? What? Not good. Not good. It's very look at what just happened. Oh god, it's a catastrophe. Add that to the fact that this is the red light district, which means there will be inherently more foot traffic at night. Drunk people trying to get home, that's a safety problem. So public safety for the RLD is getting a 3 out of 5. A pretty solid showing out of the gate, but not great. We're gonna give the red light district a C-. And if you're wondering, yes, we are only through the first district, but don't worry, some of the future ones will not take nearly as long. All right, Hepburn Heights, named after Katharine Hepburn, Audrey Hepburn. I have no idea. Either way, nobody with that name would live in this area, ever. You guys remember that old book, Where the Sidewalk Ends, by Shel Silverstein? Well, guess what? I found it. For some reason, the sidewalk just kind of stops, like the city ran out of cement and just said, nah, good enough. I cannot stress how terrible the walkability is here. You have to walk through multiple parking lots if you want to get anywhere. You have to make these weird serpentine routes through the streets. It's just bad design. This is what city planners call discontinuous pedestrian infrastructure. I call it deeply fucking annoying. There are some zones with decent sidewalk coverage, so it's not a complete disaster. But the fact that you would have to strategize your walking route every day, bad design. 1 out of 5. Am I being harsh? Probably. Transit access. So there is an L train entrance in Hepburn Heights, so on paper, should be good, right? Wrong. First problem. There's only one stairway for this entire station. That is one entrance and exit for these people to get onto the L train. During rush hour, this isn't a transit, it's a mosh pit. This is a massive fire code violation, big no-no. Second problem, the entrance is located in the parking lot of one of the high-rise towers. So technically you would be trespassing every time you have to access the L train. That's completely backwards. Transit is supposed to be public and accessible. Transit access getting a 2 out of 5. It exists, but it's poorly implemented. The land use mix here is actually not terrible. There are apartments, there are some commercial businesses, though honestly not many. There's a big apartment building with a bank on the first floor, so we have more of that vertical city planning that we talked about earlier, but it's pretty limited. Here's the thing, is the district is dominated by residential. It's almost entirely housing with very few businesses and services mixed in. That means if you live here, you're commuting somewhere else for basically everything. This is what's called a bedroom community, a place where people sleep but don't really live. So in reality, it is not mixed use, it is mono use with a few businesses sprinkled in for appearance. 2 out of 5. Street connectivity. This might be a little bit personal, but there was always something about this area of the map that felt a little strange to me. And I think it has something to do with this underpass. I can't for the life of me figure out why it was necessary. The road starts at the same elevation as it ends, and yet there is a pointless underpass here. Why wouldn't these roads just intersect with each other? Why carve out an entire part of the island to create a useless underpass? It makes navigating in this part of the map extremely annoying and cumbersome. I hated doing it, even when I was younger. Waste of public resources, and it just makes traveling around worse. 1 out of 5. Park access. Now look at all this beautiful green space, right? Nice peaceful place to come, meditate, think of... Watch your language. Where was I? Ah, that's right, meditate, think about your day. Problem is, what is there to do here? Nothing. The problem is nothing. There are no benches, there are no pathways, there's no basketball court, no fountains, zero amenities to encourage people to come to the park. That is part of city planning, is to make sure that people actually spend time in the nature areas. This is what city planners would call a passive open space, which actually inherently is not a bad thing. Passive open spaces are used as an escape from the hustle and bustle of the city, a place to meditate and get calm. Problem is, yeah, there's no peace here. So in reality, it's just wasted potential. Park access, 2 out of 5. We're going to move on to housing, and this is where the Hepburn Heights really starts to show its age a little bit. The district is dominated by these massive apartment towers. And if you know anything about urban planning history, which I did not until about 3 days ago, you will know that this is called the Tower in the Park design. This was really pushed hard in the 1960s, and we know that it failed spectacularly. The concept was build tall residential towers surrounded by open green spaces. Sounds nice, sure, on paper, but in reality, it created isolated, unsafe, and economically segregated neighborhoods. Real-life examples of this would be the Pruitt-Igoe, the Cabrini Green, and Robert Taylor homes. And these were all demolished over time because they didn't work. A lot of people like to blame the demographic of the area for its downfall, aka they were racist. But in reality, it was just poor urban planning and a greater economic struggle that was happening in the cities that led to their demise. So yeah, Hepburn Heights is that design. Not great. So basically your options are live above a bank or live in a poorly managed tower apartment. There is housing, but it's pretty bad. I'm gonna give it a 2 out of 5. Next up, employment access. So there's a bank. And I guess you could work at the front desk of the tall tower apartment if they need one, or the janitorial services, I suppose. But honestly, you're not going to find much here. If you live in Hepburn Heights, you're commuting. Period. We're going to say employment access is a 1 out of 5. Pretty bad. Let's get into safety and design. Let's start with the good. Again, there are some streetlights, there are some traffic safety signals. Not that bad. And that's it. That's about it. You see that beautiful green space we talked about earlier? The problem is it's dark, empty, and isolated, especially at night. There's no programming done here, so there's no reason for people to be here, which means that if you are here, you are more likely to be targeted for an attack. There's no witnesses, no activity, no natural deterrence. The towers themselves are set back from the street, which creates distance. Now, you might think this is eyes on the street because we have a tall tower looking over, but the problem is the taller the tower, the more the people feel separated from what's happening on the street. This isn't eyes on the street, it's the exact opposite. This is what planners call tower isolation. And that underpass, that's also a safety nightmare. There's not nearly enough proper lighting down here, so I actually think that the public safety here is worse than the red light district, and we're gonna give this a 1 out of 5. So after everything is added up, we are not looking good for this district. I'm gonna have to give this one an F. Hepburn Heights, pick up your shit. I didn't realize my light went out for this next section, so I'm gonna look a little darker than normal, don't worry. Okay, on to Harwood. Honestly, I'm gonna power through this one because this one pissed me off the most. The walkability is just plain bad. There are long stretches of roads with no shortcuts or paths for pedestrians to take. In fact, some roads don't even have proper sidewalks at all, and any crosswalk signs or markings are completely non-existent. But we will talk about that more in a little bit. So again, with all these things, the city has created an infrastructure that forces you to break the law. Walkability, 1 out of 5. Onto transit access. There isn't any. Up next, we have land use mix. I mean, there's a fire station, a radio station, which I guess is like a media building, and then the giant dump in the far north. That's it. That's this district. There are no shops, no restaurants, no services, just emergency services, a radio station, and literal trash. And as you can see here, this gas station and this car dealership do not fall within the lines of Harwood. They are technically part of St. Mark's. So we are not going to count them here. Now, this isn't unheard of in city planning. It actually is pretty common to put the things that are unsightly that people won't want to interact with out of the way. I think it just seems a little weird to put the fire station here only because we want emergency responders to get into the cities as quickly as possible. I might be wrong about this, but that feels off. Anyway, we're giving the land use mix another 1 out of 5. So street connectivity in Harwood is not necessarily an issue. There aren't even that many streets to even worry about. The real issue here is that there are no traffic lights. There are no stop signs. It's absolute chaos. We have people crossing the road at the same time that people are trying to make turns. I watched multiple accidents happen, and a lot of them involved pedestrians. There's also one road that goes along the side of the dump that is essentially a cliff. It is a blind turn leading up with no barrier, no guardrails, no warning signs. So when somebody goes over this edge, and they have every right to sue the city. So street connectivity, we're giving that a 2 out of 5. Park access. There are no parks. 0 out of 5. And next up we have housing. There is none. Now in practice, this is probably made up for by the high-rise towers in Hepburn Heights that we talked about earlier, but we're judging these districts on their own merits, and they're not close enough to the edge of the district to make me feel like it's fair enough to include them. 0 out of 5. Employment access. Okay, so finally there are some jobs here. The fire station obviously has employees. The radio station will need employees. I'm sure the dump has a couple guys working there at any given time. So I can't give this a 0. There is some employment. The problem is that there's not a lot. And again, there's also no transit. So for anybody working here, it's a bitch of a commute. So we're gonna give employment access a 2 out of 5. Finally, we have safety and design. Again, no crosswalks, no stop signs, no traffic lights, no road markings. A road with a sharp turn that leads to an open cliff. That's not just unsafe, it's illegal. This violates federal traffic control standards. The Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or the MUTCD, requires traffic signals, stop signs, and pedestrian infrastructure. Harwood has none of these. It sucks. This is also not the type of place you want to go after dark. There are not a lot of streetlights, and since there's no residents here, after 5 p.m. we can assume that this area is mostly dead. So just imagine being broken down in the middle of the night on this road right here. Terrifying. Public safety is getting a fat 1 out of 5. So this is for sure our worst district so far. I'm sadly gonna have to give this one an F-. If I could go any lower, I probably would. Next, we're on to St. Mark's. And after the catastrophe that was Harwood, this one doesn't make me want to scream into my pillow. For walkability, there are sidewalks abound in St. Mark's, plenty of open alleyways, and look at this, there are even ramps. That is accessibility done right. No! When did that go out? And while the alleyways are mostly safe to walk through, there is a few areas that I think have issues where there should be barriers. Otherwise, people might walk off of this edge and hurt themselves. I also found some weaponry here, which does not seem safe to keep on the floor, especially for areas that children have access to. But the Liberty City urban planning sector is going to choose to look the other way on that one, because I'm keeping it. But mostly these alleyways are safe. Walkability gets a 4 out of 5. This is how you design a district for pedestrians. St. Mark's really did show up when it comes to transit access. There's the subway station in Chinatown that is just off the southwest edge of St. Mark's. There's the L train entrance in Hepburn Heights that is just off the northwest edge. And you also have an L train entrance in the southeast corner that technically resides in Portland View. But there's no way to get to it from Portland View without going through St. Mark's, which means that most of this district has a 5-minute walk to get to its station, which is the gold standard. Planners call it the quarter-mile walk shed. If you're within a quarter mile of transit, it's considered accessible. St. Mark's hits the mark for that one. They get a 5 out of 5. Land use mix, and this is where St. Mark's just continues to shine. We have apartments above shops, we have housing above restaurants. This is vertical mixed use done right. You've got retail, you've got services, you got the car dealership, you got the gas station, you got the Italian restaurant, the other Italian restaurants, so many goddamn Italian restaurants, mamma mia. And even tucked into one of those row houses is another storefront, which is weird, but hey, I respect the hustle. This is what planners call a complete neighborhood. You can live here, work here, shop here, eat here, all within walking distance. You don't need to leave St. Mark's for your daily life. That's rare, and that's a 4 out of 5. I can't give it a 5 because of the lack of parks and natural spaces, which we will get to in another category. So street connectivity. The streets in St. Mark's are fine. They connect. You're not getting lost or making weird serpentine routes like you would in Hepburn Heights. But then it starts to fall apart once you look a bit closer. The traffic signals. So unlike Harwood, there are some traffic lights here. The issue is that at one intersection, there may only be 1 or 2 traffic lights, not letting every road know what it's meant to do next. Just look at what's happening here. This is what happens when you have incomplete signal coverage. Some intersections get lights, some don't, and drivers are just guessing where they should go. It's not as terrible as Harwood, as we mentioned before, but it's still pretty bad. I'm feeling a little generous because I like this place, so I'm giving it a 3 out of 5. It's my show, I can do whatever I want. On to park access. Now, St. Mark's does actually have a beautiful waterfront area. The problem is that it's owned by one elite. It is not accessible to the public. There is no encouragement to go there. This is what planners would call an elite capture of public resources. Waterfronts should be public. Cities have spent billions of dollars in real life reclaiming these waterfront accesses. So St. Mark's has a waterfront park. It's just some rich douche's backyard. 0 out of 5. Nah, giving it a 1. I like this place too much. Housing. So St. Mark's has good housing diversity. Not perfect, but good. You've got row houses, you've got apartments, you've got the vertical city structures that we talked about earlier on top of the storefronts. There are no single family homes. There is the one mansion, but again, elite douchebag. Now, I feel like I'm being a little hypercritical of it because I'm still gonna give it a 4 out of 5. Employment access. I think this one is pretty straightforward. We have already listed a lot of the businesses you can find here. We have the car dealership, the gas station, the plethora of Italian restaurants. And not just that, but these jobs are very accessible to the people who live there. I'm gonna give this one a 5 out of 5 for employment access. Finally, we're on to safety and design, and this is the one that I cannot really back up my boy on. While the alleyways are mostly well lit and open spaces that people can see into, which prevent a lot more crime, we do have the lack of fences and rails on random drop-offs in places that people can walk. There's the sketchy little alleyway that I previously mentioned before with weapons just lying on the floor. The incomplete traffic signals at intersections is very dangerous. And not just that, but the waterfront being private is actually a problem. That means that there isn't proper safety precautions there. There are no lifeguards on the waterfront. There's no security making sure that kids aren't playing in the water at night. If somebody's drowning, there's nobody there to reach them because they won't know that they're there. So sadly, I do have to give St. Mark's a 2 out of 5 for safety and design. But with that 2 out of 5 and the lack of park access, I think we can still safely say that St. Mark's is a C+ to B-. I don't know, C+ just seems not generous enough, but B- feels too generous. So Portland View is tiny. And you know what? It's pretty okay. Let's explain. The walkability. There's a surprising amount of sidewalk space here and a lot of connecting alleyways to get where you need to go. The infrastructure is there, and actually there's a few businesses that are even within the alleyways, which creates a safer alleyway. There's more eyes on the streets. The problem really lies in this big grass area here. Because while the main part of Portland View is the hospital and police station here, it does technically extend back all the way to the grocery store right before you hit the docks. Which means that if you're on this side of the city and you want to get to the grocery store, you would have to loop all the way around because there is not even a walkway that connects these two areas. This is what will eventually create what city planners call a desire path. An unofficial route that people use because the original design doesn't work. You'll see this a lot on hiking trails or through parks that have poor sidewalk services. All they need is a dirt path, not a fancy sidewalk, just a path. But still, I'm going to give the walkability in Portland View a 3 out of 5. For transit access, the subway station in Chinatown is a pretty quick and breezy 5-minute walk, and the L train entrance in the southeast corner of St. Mark's is right there. But if you are in the south of Portland View, you will have to cut through Trenton or Chinatown to get to any of the transit entrances. But Portland View is so small that I don't really think it's an issue. You would probably just head north anyway. So transit access is getting a solid 4 out of 5 from me. Up next, we have land use mix, and Portland View packs a lot into a tiny little space. You've got row houses, apartments, a hospital, a police station, a grocery store, multiple businesses, and even a forest right behind the police station. This is a complete neighborhood in miniature. Everything you need within a 5-minute walk. And the grocery store is a huge deal. In all of the other districts, we were mostly relying on restaurants and businesses to get our foods. We never even considered what the commute to the grocery store would be like. And the forest behind the police station, while visually appealing, doesn't have any pathways or benches or tables that encourage people to come and walk through it. But still, I'm going to give the land use mix a 4 out of 5. Street connectivity is up next, and this one honestly has bothered me since I was a kid. I probably could save this complaint for the Trenton section, but we're just going to do it here and now. Right here is the road south of the police station. Over to the right here is the mechanic shop where you do quite a few missions in this game. Why don't they connect? We talked about the desire path earlier with walking, and that's fine, that's different. We can just walk over grass, it's not a problem. Why do these roads not connect? fire trucks, police, all of them will have terrible access to these areas because there is no tiny little road connecting these streets. Other than that, the street connectivity is actually not that great. If you want to get to the grocery store from anywhere else in this district, you're going to have a hell of a job getting there. Street connectivity gets a 4 out of 5 for Portland View. So for park access, we did mention that forest behind the police station, and that's really about it. But I will give it some credit because in a city of concrete, something like this is very visually appealing and actually does wonders for its occupants. So I'm going to give park access a 2 out of 5. On to housing, there are row houses and some apartments, but that's about it. Housing is another 2 out of 5. Employment access, this one is not bad. We have coffee shops, clothing stores, the grocery store, which probably employs a couple dozens of people, the hospital, which is a major employer, a couple of hundreds of staff, and the police station, a government job. That is very good economic diversity. Compared to the other districts, that is actually very impressive for how small it is. We're going to give that a 4 out of 5. So for our last category in Portland View, we have safety and design. Now there are street lights and there are traffic lights, and they're mostly where they should be. That's already much better than Harwood, and even a step up from Hepburn Heights. Streets are visible, traffic control exists, but there is still this one secluded alleyway once you turn the corner here that does concern me, although there are some windows facing it and a garage right there, so it shouldn't be too bad. But still, at night, you wouldn't catch me there. Or maybe you would, and you'd be catching these hands, you know what I mean? We're gonna give public safety a 3 out of 5 for Portland View. Adding everything up, I'd say that Portland View actually does pretty well across the board. I'm gonna give it a solid C+. Trenton. Okay. Trenton is basically Harwood's industrial cousin, just a different flavor of terrible. So starting off, I will say walkability here is pretty good. We have all of our basic sidewalks, and then there's even this, a small walkway that connects these two sectors. Yeah, baby. Which bothers me because this is exactly what I was complaining about just a few yards away. This proves that the city can do it. They did it right here. They just can't do it consistently, which might be worse. But still, we're gonna give walkability a nice 3 out of 5. Pretty easy to get around this area. Transit access, we have 0. There are no L train entrances, there are no subway stations, nothing. This is an industrial zone. This is where people work. So the question is, how do they get here? They would need a car, and if they can't afford a car, well, now they're just not allowed to work here. And the transportation cost will now probably eat up 20 to 30% of their paycheck. Even early 20th century cities built subways to industrial areas because they understood no transit equals no workers equals no industry. Trenton missed that memo. 0 out of 5. On to land use mix, it's mainly industrial. Factories, warehouses. And they're not even spaced logically most of the time. There's a lot of dead space in this area. The big problem with Trenton is that it feels illegal to be there even though it's not. Like, have you ever been in those back hallways of a mall, kind of behind the stores? Some of the bathrooms are located back there, and it just feels like you shouldn't be there. Like if a security guard catches you, you're gonna get in trouble, but you know that legally you are allowed there? That's Trenton. Trenton is a mall hallway. What the fuck does that even, what does that mean? This is what planners would call a non-place. A space of transition, not a destination. Nobody wants to go to Trenton unless they're working. It's basically a liminal space in urban form. Giving land use mix a 1 out of 5. Street connectivity. So the street connectivity in Trenton is not terrible, but look at this. This is a 1 car length stoplight. What happened? So at this first intersection, only 1 car can get through before they are blocking the intersection here. The intersection basically gridlocks itself by design. And there's also that strange little cul-de-sac thing where the dog food factory and the car mechanic are. I know cul-de-sac isn't the right term because I think cul-de-sac is only used for residential areas, but it's just confusing that it doesn't connect to the road right across from it to create a more steady flow of traffic. Street connectivity, 2 out of 5. Little dangerous and confusing. So for park access, I'm just gonna go ahead and say I'm giving it a 2 out of 5. It's very similar to the Portland View problem we had, where there is grass, there is trees, but they're just not very welcoming. If anything, it feels like these grass areas are here out of necessity and not out of amenity. So yeah, I'm giving a park access a 2 out of 5, and I think I'm being generous. For housing in Trenton, there is 1 apartment tower. And again, as we have stressed before, this is an industrial district. which means there are probably close to 300 to 500 employees in this area, if not more. This means that the vast majority of people who work here will have to commute, which means more cars, which means more traffic, which means more pollution, and more infrastructure strain. Modern cities today are actually converting old industrial zones to more mixed-use areas, because these dead zones just didn't work. We have Brooklyn's Dumbo, San Francisco's Mission Bay. They added housing to industrial areas to help create a 24-hour district. Trenton, on the other hand, seems to be going in the opposite direction. We're giving housing a 1 out of 5. So the employment access in Trenton is actually pretty good. There are a lot of jobs available here, and not only that, they are union jobs, which usually come with good benefits and career pathways. The problem really just lies in what we talked about before, the access to get to these jobs. So there are a lot of jobs. I want to give this a 5 out of 5, but I can't because of the access, which is in the name. So we have to give it a 4 out of 5, and even then I'm probably being generous. Finally, the safety and design for Trenton. Streetlights do exist, walk and don't walk signs are in place, so it's not complete chaos like Harwood, but the problem lies in these 3 giant exposed electrical towers. If these are still active, this is a huge liability. And let's say they are defunct, they are also what's known as an attractive nuisance. This is a legal term for dangerous things that attract children. So empty swimming pools, construction equipment, and yes, giant climbable electric towers. If I was a 10-year-old, I'd be getting all up in that. Nobody clipped that out of context. Therefore, safety and design is getting a 2 out of 5. So when we add up our score for Trenton, I'm going to have to give it an F. Not as bad as Harwood for sure, but still pretty damn bad. Okay, finally we're on to our last district. This is Chinatown. And I have to say, they nailed it. This is what city planning looks like. Walkability, look at these alleyways. Not only are they extremely wide and accessible to the public, there are also storefronts facing into them, which means more eyes on the street, which means a safer public. Jane Jacobs would be extremely proud. And there's even a dirt trail in the park that we have not seen before that connects the basketball court to another section of the district. And yes, I said basketball court, and we will get to that. And then there's even these little bollards that stop cars from entering the pedestrian alleys. Compared to everything else we've seen in this game, I don't think I can tell you how smart this is. It's physical pedestrian protection without putting a sign up. It's natural, it looks nice, and it's integrated into the city seamlessly. So walkability is a 5 out of 5. And I know you might be asking yourself, yeah, but Scourge, what about those crosswalks that weren't marked that we talked about in the earlier episode you made a big deal about? Listen, I'm over that. Okay, that was a while ago. I am long past it. You see how long this video is? At a certain point, you just have to look yourself in the mirror and learn how to move on. Stop living in the past. So for those with good memory, you'll remember that for transit access, we actually do have 2 entrances that the red light district can also use. That is the L train on the east side, as well as the subway station. Now, the southeast corner of the Chinatown district does have a little bit more problems when it comes to transit access, but funnily enough, this is where the courthouse, or YMCA, I don't know what this is, like the community building? I've never been sure what that was. Anyway, that's where that is and the basketball court is, so there's actually not many residents there. I don't know if this was intentional, but it worked out. We're gonna give transit access a solid 4 out of 5 for Chinatown. On to land use mix for Chinatown. We have the apartments over shops, classic urbanism. There's a factory inside of the district which doesn't seem to produce any pollution, at least from what I can tell. Multiple restaurants, plenty of shops, services, the laundromats. It's diverse commercial activity. And then there's the actual park. Not just a grass field, not just some trees, a park with benches and paths and basketball courts. Now, folks, this is what we're talking about. This is what we're looking for. This is what we play for. I have been walking through 7 different districts waiting for a real park, and I finally found it. I'm gonna pull the curtain back a little bit and admit something, that it was kind of funny recording this, that I genuinely felt excitement when I found this basketball court. And I don't think that there's any other scenario in which I would be playing Grand Theft Auto 3 and feel genuine excitement when finding this basketball court. So this experience has been kind of fun. Either way, Chinatown totally delivers. On land use mix, we're giving it a 5 out of 5, baby. Street connectivity, the streets are logical. They connect, The grid makes sense. If you make a wrong turn, you can course correct pretty easily. Now yes, there are these alleyways that are technically wide enough to be used for vehicles, but can only be used by pedestrians, but I think with how much space is used in this area and how many roads there already are, this is not an issue. It just makes walkability even better while not hindering street connectivity. In the words of Todd Howard, it just works. 4 out of 5. Park access. You know what, I already gushed enough about the park in the land use mix section, so I'm just gonna say 5 out of 5. Housing, we have row houses, apartments, vertical mixed use. There's a variety here, different price points, different family sizes. We have options. It's not perfect, there's no luxury housing, no real single family units with yards, but compared to Hepburn Heights monoculture or Harwood's zero housing, this is a godsend, especially with how many jobs and amenities are in this area. The job housing balance is impeccable. 4 out of 5. Speaking of job housing balance, we're on to the employment access, and I gotta say, it's top notch. Restaurants, laundromats, the factory, which must employ at least 100 to 200 people alone. The only issue is that a lot of these jobs are in similar sectors. Food service, laundry service, a lot of service jobs. Now, if you work at the factory, you can hook yourself up with a nice union gig, but other than that, we're looking at some pretty low-wage jobs. Giving it a 3 out of 5. Finally, on to the last category of our last location. This is safety and design inside of Chinatown. The streetlights are placed correctly, the crosswalks are visible, traffic control does exist in the inner parts of the city pretty well. The park has fencing, keeps kids safe from traffic, and let me bring up those bollards again. This is CPTED done right. Natural surveillance on the streets, lighting, clear boundaries, and access control. We are giving public safety to Chinatown a 4 out of 5. And with all those numbers added up, we're gonna have to give Chinatown a solid, astounding B+. This is how districts should work. So there we have it. In GTA's Liberty City, Portland, Chinatown is the best place to live. Anyway, guys, this has been an extremely long one. I did not realize how much would go into this when I started making it, but if you have stuck with me through this entire video, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave a comment for me. Let me know if you like this video, because if you did, I can make more stuff like this. And also, I do make music and have been for the last decade or so. If you want to check out anything I've made, you can find it on Spotify or anywhere that streams music under Scourge. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope that I opened your eyes just a little bit to city planning and the ins and outs of what goes into making your city a happy place to be.